Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of this new Explosions in the Sky record, Wilderness. This is the latest full-length LP from Texas instrumental rock band Explosions in the Sky, who've almost been around for 20 years at this point. Now, we have not heard from these guys in a full-length album capacity since 2011's Take Care, Take Care, Take Care, but they have spent the 5 years since then dropping several original soundtracks for a couple different movies. And I wasn't sure when we were going to hear another album from Explosions in the Sky. I wasn't that into their last full-length album. I figured with that record, they had squeezed the last dying breath out of this kind of third wave post-rock sound. Twangy guitars, slow, basic chord progressions, crescendos. But now the band is back on their album grind, and sadly, the 9 tracks on this thing, they are as slow and as tedious and mostly as predictable as I had expected. But now, just with a larger instrumental palette. Explosions in the Sky have definitely come back with a bigger instrumental presentation on this thing. It's not just drums and guitars anymore. There are some pianos worked into this record, some whistling, it sounded like, string sections, throbbing electronics, a droning, buzzing organ at the beginning of one track. And I do think the production on this thing is generally good. It balances all of this instrumentation really well. But when it comes to the compositions at the core of these tracks, Explosions in the Sky's compositional style, their songwriting style, is no more inspired than it was 10 years ago. I would actually argue that 10 years ago it was more inspired, it was more refreshing and interesting. Because here we're getting the same cliched crescendos. I mean, the song Infinite Orbit is just a single crescendo after a 2-minute build. The same aimless guitar noodling over very hopeful and triumphant chord progressions. The same plain reverb effects laid on nearly everything in the mix in order to give the songs this larger-than-life feeling, give these tracks more weight sonically than they actually have compositionally. The band takes almost no risks on this record with this new flood of instrumentation. It's just kind of the same rehashed formulas with some different sonic window dressing around it. And the exciting moments that are on this record, they are few and far between. Like the first half of the song Logic of a Dream, which is a very tense build-up, ear-piercing tones, tense layers upon layers of instrumentation. What sounds like huge group drums all being played. The band is really living up to their band name on this track. But then all of a sudden, the larger-than-life instrumentation fades away in favor of just kind of this quiet, jangly rock instrumental that fails after a few minutes.
Why can't you talk right, Anthony? Why can't you talk right?
It sounds like the band is still kind of in that mode of delivering soundtrack music and not rock music that sounds engaging, sounds exciting to listen to just on its own. I guess I could see some of this stuff working here so far if it had some visual accompaniment, I guess. And even when the band tries something a little different, like the diddling, very tight guitar leads on the song Disintegration Anxiety, sounds a little math rock inspired, the band plays this riff until it is just no longer interesting. They play the life out of it. And the thing is that this track, compositionally, it's not really going anywhere, and the band plays as if they know that that's the case. They're very much going through the motions on this track and many others on here. These compositions being so repetitive would be one thing if the band were playing a little gutsier and the grooves were more fluid and I guess a little more enthralling, and there was some interplay and some tension to the way the band was performing on this record. But a lot of the time there isn't. The song Losing the Light is a surprise semi-ambient piece in the middle of the record, which isn't too bad. I like the soundscape the band presents in the last third of the track with the roaring guitars and the ethereal tones and a little bit of piano, gentle piano mixed in there, some pulsating, weird, noisy electronics. But then the final 2 tracks are just a few empty attempts at some beautiful instrumental rock music before the record closes out. Empty bliss, I guess you could call it. Though I will say, Colors in Space, I did think the drums were a little bit more aggressive on this track, and I like the very dissonant just shrieking finish that the track had. Here, the band's performance actually struck me as being like a little krautrock inspired. It felt very in the moment, kind of organic. But right before the album closes out, they go right back to that super pleasant, very middle of the road performance style that makes so much of this album drab. Unfortunately, I just did not care for this record. Just too many songs on here just followed the typical explosions in the sky formula, despite the introduction of all of this new instrumentation. And even when the band was trying something new, they were trying something different, I feel like they were kind of at a loss as to where to progress some of these ideas, which I guess is to be expected because Explosions in the Sky's progressions in their songs are usually pretty typical. So they're not really going to pull a rabbit out of a hat when all of a sudden you hear something slightly different from their usual sound. Again, the production on this thing is decent, but there's just so much to be desired from this album compositionally. So many cliffhangers on these songs, so many tracks that really aren't that fulfilling, all because the writing is just so neglected. It's just so bare. It's just so sparse.
Last thing I want to add is I don't feel like these songs really do that great of a job of reinforcing one another either. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if all of these tracks were just a bunch of loose change left over from Explosions in the Sky's past several soundtrack records.
Feeling a decent 4 on this record.
Transition. Have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Explosions in the up there area, wilderness, forever.